When I say the name Gary O'Neill to you, what do you think? Do you think of a manager who has earned his stripes at Wolverhampton Wanderers, a side who was written off by many pundits up and down the country and destined for the championship, according to them? Or do you think of somebody who's a PE teacher, a clown, and a lot worse? Do you think of Gary O'Neill as the next possible Liverpool manager? Well, for what it's worth, here are my thoughts on why Gary O'Neill is loved by the Wolves fans, wanted by Liverpool, and for some reason hated by Cherries. Gary O'Neill took over at AFC Bournemouth from Scott Parker. Now, Scott Parker started off the season with a win over Aston Villa at home. Everything looked like it was going rosy. All those concerns that the Fulham fans told us about, that Scott Parker, couldn't manage in the Premier League, we all thought it's all shit, really. However, the next three games would decide his destiny. Those three games were against Manchester City, where the side fought hard, but we expected the defeat. Against Arsenal, which after 10 minutes we were 2-0 down. And then against Liverpool, where we were beaten 9-0 pretty convincingly, thanks to Scott's absolutely terrible tactics. It wasn't a good day. I was there. It was painful. Scott Parker, though, could have probably kept his job if he didn't do one thing. And that thing was knock our owner, Maxim Deming, who has been fantastic in supporting Eddie Howe, been supportive to this club over so many years, for not spending enough money. Now, of course, we didn't know at the time, but Bill Foley was looking at the club, was considering purchasing AFC Bournemouth from Maxim. And that probably is why we didn't really spend much in the summer before we was promoted, or before we kicked a ball in the Premier League. So Scott Parker is sacked. Who is there to pick up the mantle? Now, of course, we had a game against, funny enough, Wolverhampton Wanderers in midweek. And that man was Gary O'Neill, a man who had been a coach at Liverpool, who had worked under the likes of Harry Redknapp, Alan Pardew, and many others throughout his career. He was a man that was quite reserved, quite. He wasn't a big name. He wasn't a big name. He was one of those players, like you would say Simon Francis or Steve Cook, or players like that, that do their job quietly, go about their business quietly and perform at the highest level without much fuss. Well, Gary O'Neill took over the side and in his first game as AFC Bournemouth manager got a 0-0 draw against his to be future side, Wolves. Now, a lot of people say that this was a drab performance, and yes, it was. But after a 9-0 thrashing, the best result you could possibly get is a 0-0 draw. Shut up shop at the back, build that confidence, because let's be fair, Scott Parker, as well as knocking Maxim, also decided he was going to knock his entire team and say that they weren't ready, not good enough for the Premier League. What did he know? Because Gary O'Neill, after that Liverpool defeat, was unbeaten for the longest period out of any side. Between our game against Liverpool and the defeat against Southampton at home, yes, it was painful. It's Saints. Every other side in the top flight had been beaten at least once. The Cherries, though, were doing well. Gary looked as if he was steering us safe from trouble. Now, of course, we know that there was a little bit of a dip before the World Cup. It ended, and just before the World Cup kicked off, we had two fantastic wins against Everton, a very, very poor Everton side managed by Frank Lampard. And after the World Cup, it took a little bit of time for Gary to get going when he was given the job permanently. Now, there was lots of talk during the World Cup, and some of that was really exciting. Some of that was about Marcelo Bielsa, a man who had managed Leeds into the Premier League, who'd done a fantastic job in turning what is a giant into a side that was formidable in the Premier League. It did take a little bit of dip his second season at Elland Road, but everybody was really excited. There was also Kajil Knutson, who was also mentioned, a coach who was up and coming, somebody who was exciting. And then there was Gary. And then there was Gary. And Gary, by a lot of fans, wasn't exciting. He was possibly drab, he was possibly boring, but one thing that they overlooked was that he was a very astute coach. I had the chance to actually meet Gary in person, and it was a real pleasure. Sadly, it was when Algard was very, very ill, and we, thanks to Steve Fletcher, we had the opportunity to go around, meet all the players, and also spent a bit of time with Gary. And Gary, during that event, was firstly very polite, very humble, but very astute. He explained his philosophy of, if a team does this, we do this. He was a scenario based manager. And to be honest, with the side as it was, and the side firstly devoid of a little bit of confidence after Scott Parker, also the side that, had just recently been promoted, everybody expected us to go down. We were written off before the season even started. Gary O'Neill was planning a way to get us enough points to get us across the line. Now, of course, I did, after the World Cup, have my doubts, like a lot of Bournemouth fans. But the PE teacher comments, the clown comments, were completely and utterly unfair to this man who showed so much promise so quickly, who pulled a situation that was going to be so difficult, where we was written off, and managed to keep us up with 4 games remaining. Yes, we had our bumps. We went to Elland Road and we was 3-1 up and got beat 4-3. It was poor. It was disappointing. We were shouting at the TV screens and in the stadiums. But Gary did a good job overall. We went to Spurs, we won. We went to Leicester, we won. Of course, we won those big games against Everton. We went to St Mary's and we beat Southampton on their own patch. And of course, we beat Leeds in the game that would ultimately secure our safety in the Premier League. Gary O'Neill's mission was a success. Yes, we had 4 games afterwards, and yes, a lot of people could say that we looked like we were on the beach, but that didn't matter. This side, this side, who are by easily one of the smallest sides ever to have played in the Premier League, had survived again. And we was looking forward to a second successive season in the Premier League, and our 7th in total, thanks to Gary O'Neill. Now, Gary O'Neill is probably not going to be up there with the likes of Eddie Howe. And who is going to be? He's not going to be up there with the likes of Harry Redknapp. And again, who is going to be? It's going to take somebody very, very big to do that. Is Andoni Iraola up there with those two? No, there's quite a long way of the journey left to go. However, there was shock in the summer, especially from myself. Gary O'Neill was sacked by AFC Bournemouth. After all, he did a fantastic job. He'd done and completed his mission of keeping this football club that everybody written off, in the top flight. We could understand, though, after Andoni Iraola was appointed, maybe a change in our aspirations, maybe a change in what we want to do, in the style of play. Was Gary's football always good? No, it was far from it sometimes. Sometimes it was ugly, but ugly sometimes can be effective. Attractive, as Burnley have found out this season, can sometimes result in being relegated. They might still stay up, but you know, let's run with it. Let's run with it. Hopefully, fingers crossed for them, they will do. But Gary O'Neill was sacked. Now, what he could have done at this point is go back into a coaching role. He could have sulked, but away from his young family, he focused on his next job. And he got his next job with 5 days of the season before the season kicked off at Wolverhampton Wanderers at Molineux. Julian Lopetegui had left the club, and left the club in a complete and utter mess. It was fair to say. Gary O'Neill come in, and Wolves fans were not overawed. Bournemouth fans said that Gary O'Neill had won the lottery twice. Some people don't win it once in their lifetime. I don't agree at all. Don't agree at all. Gary O'Neill was written off by AFC Bournemouth fans before he even got the temporary manager's position. The fans of AFC Bournemouth wanted somebody bigger. They'd been, treated to Eddie Howe, a legend of a football club, taking on a manager's job and making a complete success of it, taking us from League Two to the Premier League, when nobody ever gave us a chance, and keeping us there for 5 seasons. These same fans, some of them even wrote off Eddie before he left the club. Before Eddie Howe, Sir Eddie Howe, left the club, they wrote him off. And they wrote off Gary O'Neill before a ball was even kicked. The clown comments, his face was put on a clown. The PE teacher comments, and there was even a lot worse. It was unfair. It was uncalled for. It was just damn right nasty. And we got above our station. Not myself, but the vocal minority. I say that because there was a silent majority at Dean Court who appreciated everything he did. Gary O'Neill kept us in the Premier League. And without Gary O'Neill doing that, this football club would have been in the Championship. We would have been going to Rotherham. And who knows what would have happened? Would we have been back? Would Bill Foley have lost interest? We never know. And thankfully, we'll never know. But Gary O'Neill went to Wolverhampton Wanderers, and this season has done an absolutely sterling job of keeping Wolves in the top flight. Now, remember, it was a dissettled squad. It was a squad that had lost some top players. And what Gary O'Neill did was find out how to make that team effective, like he did at AFC Bournemouth. Now, don't get me wrong, Wolves haven't always been attractive to watch. And watching from afar, and watching more of their games than any other team in the Premier League, it's fair to say that Wolves, haven't been particularly that good at certain points, but they've been effective. With ourselves, we started off very, very slowly under Andoni Iraola. And there was questions after that 3-0 defeat against Everton, whether or not Andoni was up to the task. Thankfully, I was proved wrong, and many others were proved wrong by Andoni Iraola. But never did we ever call him a clown. Never did we call him a PE teacher. What we thought was Andoni was trying to do the best he could do with the squad he had, trying to play the tactics he was employed to make a difference with. Gary O'Neill did exactly the same at AFC Bournemouth and did exactly the same at Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, like I say, apart from the Cherries, I've seen more games from Wolves than any other side in the top flight. And like I say, it's not all being attractive, but by playing attractive doesn't necessarily get you the points. And Gary, had things gone in his favour, could have been sitting sixth in the Premier League. A lot of people have reported that 11 points have been lost because of VAR decisions, because of dodgy decisions that have gone against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Yes, things have gone for them as well. However, what you've got to look at is Gary probably hasn't had the run of the green this year. But what Gary O'Neill has done is he's made a side who were written off before a ball was even kicked, with no preparation time, into a side that is formidable and was hunting down Europe. Gary O'Neill deserves a lot of credit from our fans for what he's done, from AFC Bournemouth fans. He's proved people wrong. He isn't a clown. He hasn't won the lottery twice. He's done it through sheer hard work and determination. And Gary O'Neill is a fantastic manager, as Richard Hughes seems to agree with. Because the rumours that are coming out of Liverpool is that Gary O'Neill could be on his way to Anfield. Now, of course, like I say, he's absolutely loved by Wolves fans for what he has done. For some reason, he's hated by some of our fans in our fan base. Don't understand it. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. Gary has got always a lot of respect from myself. Going to Liverpool could well be the wrong move at this point in time. But Gary is an ambitious chap, but he does things quietly. And if he goes to Liverpool, I have got no doubt that he will be a success. But how long will it take for that success to kick in? That is the big question. Liverpool, the expectations will have gone up. But if he does make a success of it, all those people that called him that clown, called him that PE teacher, will be eating humble pie. And really, Gary O'Neill deserves the appreciation, the respect of every single AFC Bournemouth fan, and without a doubt, every single Wolves fan for what he's done there. Let us know what you think about the man, Gary O'Neill. Do keep your comments clean and tidy, and I'm sure Gary O'Neill will continue to have a fantastic career in the game. He's proven what an astute manager he is, with sides that maybe might have been under equipped for the task in hand.